Now, our guest today is Reverend Paul Bains, who is the minister of the St. Samuel's Church in East Palo Alto, and he is also the co-director of the We Hope program. Reverend Bains, thank you for joining us this morning. The group you see here is a small part of the members of the Kannon Do Buddhist Zen Meditation Center in Mountain View. And like other spiritual communities, our practice encourages compassion and kindness and generosity and taking care of the less fortunate. And so we've all been inspired by your We Hope program, and we're interested in learning more about it and just how you got it started. Let me just say that the members of Kannon Do are quite concerned about the conflicts that are taking place right now in American society, the conflicts that are continuing to tear this country apart. In particular, we want to expand our understanding of how racial inequality in the United States affects the lives of African Americans, and we want to explore ways that we might be able to be part of a solution to that cruel prejudice that's been a part of the culture for so many generations. So we hope that you can speak to us today about your own experiences as an African American in today's society and the experiences of your congregation, and what role you see the Black Lives Movement playing in today's social and political environment. And again, we're very grateful to you for taking the time to be with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Lester, and the whole Kannon Do faith group here. It's an honor, it's a privilege to be with you all. And I would say first and foremost, I want to say thank you for being willing to have what I consider insightful and even to some extent courageous conversations. Last night, I was part of being on a team that helped architect it was called Beyond Words. And it was really a challenge to other faith leaders from all different levels, areas of faith, to come together and, in a sense, have a level of repentance for a spirit of indifference. And I can drill down a little bit further into that when we get to more of my experience. But, to start off with your first question of, how we started. Yes, I'm a person of faith, as you can see. My father, traveled from Texas to California with 2 quarters in his pocket on the train and found 2 jobs. And he always believed in a strong work ethic, even though he had experienced racism and prejudice through his whole life, working in San Francisco and owning a parking lot, worked as a doorman in some of the hotels there. And he would just share stories with me of how he allowed his faith to help him deal with the racist and prejudiced acts of others. And one illustration was he was opening the door for a man, and the man went and hit him in his mouth and knocked my father down. And my father asked, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "You shut up, you stupid N-word." And unbeknownst to that man, my father was a prize fighter in the Army. But because of his faith, um, you know, he didn't do anything. He just says, that's not right. You shouldn't have done that. And my father told me that story. Um, but there's a second part to the story, that the man came back 3 days later, it was a white man, and wanted to apologize to my father, and then told my father to hit him in the mouth. And then what my father did says, I'm not going to do that. And I accept your apology. And this is the reason why, because of his faith. And so that's always stuck with me. Um, Even though I have grown up in, I've lived as far south as Mountain View, and I've lived as far north as Redwood City. Born at the uh, old Stanford Hospital 5 hospitals ago. And so I grew up in this Mid-Peninsula area experiencing racism even from an early child. And my first known experience was when I was in 5th grade or sixth grade, where they had a dairy farm company in Palo Alto, not East Palo Alto, but Palo Alto. And excuse me, it was 7th grade. And they were hiring, students. And I went up to the guy at the front desk area, and he said, "We don't hire your kind here." And I didn't really understand it. Your kind. And I was thinking, okay, I guess maybe I'm a male, or maybe they want females. I don't know. Um, and then I thought about it, and I brought it up with, friends and relatives, and they were saying, well, that's because you're black. Um, in high school, we knew, growing up in Palo Alto, which is, a very affluent community, um, I would get stopped quite frequently by the cops in Palo Alto asking me, what am I doing? Why am I here? And I would tell them, well, I live here. And then they would ask me, well, where do you go to school? And I would tell them the local school. And then they knew I lived there, because I wouldn't know all of that information if I didn't. And that was quite often until, people recognized your face if it was the same cops. But if it was new cops, you'd still experience that. And one time, as I was in high school, and this is when I transferred over to Mountain View High School, which is now torn down. I reported my car stolen because someone took my car, and then they called, say, hey, we think we found your car. And this was right over there on Ringstorff, and right over there where um, the In-N-Out Burger is, in that area. And so me and my cousin went to go, he drove me over there to go pick up the car. And we got there, and then cars came out of nowhere, and they pulled guns on us and told us to lay down in the middle of the street. And my cousin was like, his name was Gary. He said, "What's wrong with you idiots? Why are you pulling it? This is our car." And I told him, "Shut up, because we know cops have itchy fingers." That's what we've grown up to. We've grown up to, we've all had the talk of keep your hands up, and this is before, all of that is being captured now. And so they handcuffed us, threw us in the back of the car, and then they found out that we were the owners of the car. I was the owner of the car. I don't recall if anyone said they were sorry or not, because you are somewhat traumatized by guns being pulled on you, and thinking that this could be the end of your life. And so those are some of the experiences as I had in junior high, high school. And then My family owned a moving company. This is as I was in college, and we would move households and we'd move office and industrial and electronic businesses. And a lady called me, and I answered the phone and says, "Hey, I need a mover. Can you come and give us an estimate?" And I said, "Yes, I can be there in 10 minutes," because I knew where the address, the street was, and got there literally in 10 minutes, and gave her my card, said, "Hi, I'm Paul Bains." And she looked at my card, she looked at me, and she saw it says Bains Moving and Storage. And she goes, "Are you related to the people? Are you part of the ownership?" I said, "Well, my family, yes, my family owns it." "So you're the actual owners of the business? Your family is?" I said, "Yes." She goes, "Okay, well, thank you. We already have somebody." And then I left, and then I started thinking. I said, "Wait a minute. She just called me within 10 minutes. There's no way in the world that she could have gotten somebody in 10 minutes." Um, and so it's just, as we say, another episode of dealing with racist perspectives and racism, period. Um, then when it comes to my congregation, um, not just relegated to Black people, but I've had our congregation is multi-ethnic, multicultural. We're not large, but we're very diverse. And some of the Asian and some of the Latino members of our congregation, the kids came up to me and said, "Are we going to get deported, Pastor?" These people are saying that we are XX. They're saying these very negative things, and these are children that are coming up to me. These are children, from 7 years to 12, 13 years old, and and we had to reassure them about, one, not being deported, and two, that we will do everything in our power to protect them from some of the comments that they've heard, but help them manage their way through those comments. And so um, I've had members, particularly Black ones, that have come up to me and says they won't let me. I have the money, my credit is good, and they won't rent the space to me, the housing space. Um, and those stories just are nonstop. Um, there are stories that I've heard from my congregation um, where they said that, I've been on this job for X amount of years. I went through all the course trainings. I have my education, but then someone new came in and then they promoted them over me. So we hear a vast variety of demonstrations of um, racism overall, and it really becomes challenging for our members um, because we are, one of my favorite scriptures from my faith tradition is, "By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, that ye have love one for another, one to another." It doesn't make a difference what your color is, what your ethnicity is, do you speak English or not. It's all about love. um, and I have a little saying, love to love and hate to hate. um, so it's been challenging in growing up as a Black man. It's been challenging as Black people in this country, and I've been speaking at quite a few different town halls and around these national platforms of talking about racism and systemic racism at that. And we have to kind of look at, where the foundation is of some of this stuff. Um, when it, as I speak, I I always reflect back upon, or I speak from a place of what my father did in San Francisco when he got hit in the mouth. We have a little saying on our wall in our church: "Stand up for what is right, if even if you're standing alone." That's just who we are, and what we're about. I'm all about being more solution driven than problem consumed. And and my faith, it says, to whom much is given, much is required. I can easily um, um, have a extreme radical perspective on how to approach this racism, this chasm between blacks and non-blacks. I'll say it like that, but particularly white people. And when I look at my community of East Palo Alto, um, I looked at how the people here were being treated by the police in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, and even the early 90s, when we were known as a murder capital of the country per capita. And you have these great cops, and you had these cops that were part of what they call the wolf pack, that would take um, uh, perpetrators, alleged perpetrators, people who have maybe sold drugs. They would take the drug money and they would keep it. It would not show up on the records and things of that nature. And so historically, law enforcement and African Americans, Black people, have been on two different sides because of the atrocities and abuse of power. Stating back all the way to when the police department was established. And so, again, I like to be solution driven than problem consumed. So we established the police chaplaincy here in East Palo Alto, where I got members of my church and member of another church to become police chaplains. Um, and that was in 2004. And so what we helped do was bridge the gap between law enforcement and people of color. Um, and one day I had my uniform on as I was working with some Latino kids in our building, because we did a midnight soccer and a midnight basketball program. And I came in with my uniform, and the kids say, because I don't like kids, I'm old school, so people don't call me by my first name. They'll call me Pastor, Pastor Paul, Uncle Paul. They just got to put a handle on it. um, and so they said, Pastor Paul, uh, you're a cop? I said, what does that mean, Jose? There's a bunch of them. But I've been telling you all this stuff, things I've been doing and all that kind of stuff. And um, I said, yeah, so what does that mean? Does that make me a bad person? No, you're cool with us, but you're a cop, and so they would, I said, so do you know that every law enforcement officer that wears a uniform and that has a badge is not a bad person, just like every pastor or every faith leader has not always been the best person in some situations. Every teacher, even every parent, there's bad apples in every occupation that abuse their power and take advantage of the trust that has been bestowed upon them. And so my goal was to get them to understand that all cops are not bad, which I stand by that to this very day. There are some that have really abused their profession and damaged their profession. Um, and so it's all about mitigating and helping to address and create a pathway forward for different perspectives, different entities to come together and look at how can we solve problems together, as opposed to how do we, you know, dig in from our own perspective and not be mindful of someone else. The old saying, seek to understand to be understood, is critically important to me when it comes to problem solving, no matter what the problem is and who the problem's with. And so, knowing that I've been abused, knowing that Blacks have been abused and discriminated against, um, you know, we as faith leaders, as community leaders, we must use our area of influence, whether it's with politicians, whether it's with foundations, whether it's with other faith institutions, or just people in large and law enforcement, to make the world a better place than what it was yesterday for today. Um, so that's where I spend my energy. That's where I channel my focus, is to be, again, more of a problem solver than just a communicator of bad news. Um, One of the things when I was speaking around the country, I referred to Richard Rothenstein, who wrote the book The Color of Law, where he laid out how the federal government and the state and the local governments um, actually implemented practices such as redlining that prevented specifically Black people from obtaining housing, quality housing, or housing in certain areas. And that is something that actually in his book um, that really was emphasized here in liberal California, and particularly East Palo Alto, Richmond, Milpitas, and San Jose. He calls it out, and how the government prevented Blacks from getting HUD loans to be able to purchase a house or to live in that a certain community, even after they came back from war for fighting for this country. Um, and so, to me, that's a critical component of how Blacks have ended up on the lower economic spectrum, because they've been kept out from home ownership. And my personal and professional goal is to disrupt generational poverty. And how do you do that? You do that through education, and you do that through home ownership. So one of the things that, as if I didn't have nothing else to do, is that we are creating a modular housing factory in East Palo Alto that will specifically address 30% AMI folks. That's area medium income. So that's your working poor, and that's your homeless. Um, when we started, we started in mind with dealing with violence prevention, homelessness, and education. Now, 20 years later, after we started We Hope, um, we have 94 employees, co-workers, and we are in 4 counties in 16 cities. We have 2 shelters, one in San Francisco, one in East Palo Alto. We have a jobs program. We have a lot of different things, and you can go on the website, the We Hope website. But one component that we didn't have was while we get the homeless housed through our case management, we don't actually have housing that we're producing. So now we've created another entity to do that. And our goal is to be able to place these steel modular units on property that's available through faith-based organizations, nonprofit, or government, to specifically address, again, the 30% AMI folks. a two-bedroom, for example, would be $85,000, not including the land. Um, we are actually doing this with Sam Licardo in the city of San Jose, where we're providing 36 modules for 120 homeless people, most of them families, to live in. And we're doing that with our partners, Sandhill and Habitat for Humanity. The unique thing about it is not just the low cost to produce this product, but also in which the collaborative nature and speed of working with the city of San Jose to make this happen within just a 4-month period. So in other words, the city and the county provided the land, Habitat for Humanity is the developer, and our Indie Dwell product is the product for them to live in. So that's been an example of where there's a will, there can be a way. I can go on and talk more about my experiences. However, I like to have interaction and for people to ask questions. And I am comfortable responding to all questions. Believe me, I am in many circles, and I'm also a person that is very candid, particularly if it's one-on-ones, but in the group session that where it's appropriate. I do believe in making sure that that there is compassion, but also that there's action, because there's an old saying, there's three people in the world. There's people that make things happen, there's people that watch things happen, and then there's people that wonder what happened. And so I'm a person that I like to see people make things happen. So I also push people. I'm what you call a driver's driver. Even though I'm a pastor, I'm a driver's driver pastor. So, and I believe in people can be angry and not sin, but that anger has to be channeled into something that's going to have a positive outcome. And I've about 2 months ago, I've spoke to about at various marches, either I helped organize or I was a speaker at, about 16,000 people. And one of the things that really touched my heart was as I was speaking to a group of about 4,000 or 5,000, that 60-70% of the people there were non-Black at the march, and they were from all different ages. And in the words of Dr. King, Martin Luther King, it's not the shouting of our enemies, but the silence of our friends that really do the most damage to us as Blacks, when they don't really call out the racist systems that need to be addressed, or when they see racism occurring. Because, and here's my candidness, either you are a racist or you are an anti-racist. And my faith, it says either you're hot or you're cold. If you lukewarm, God will spew out of his mouth. So there is no neutral ground when it comes to racism. Either you are racist or you are an anti-racist. And so people have to understand that. And they also have to understand that this is not a Black problem. This is actually a white problem. What people are now being waken up to has been happening for 400 years. we're just able to chronicleize it now, video chronicleize it. The beatings, the lynchings, the hangings, the shootings, it's been happening again and again and again. So I am encouraged on one hand that there are people like such as yourselves that are willing to have these types of discussion, that's willing to do a deeper dive and lean in on these on this subject matter. Now, Lester, you asked about Black Lives Matter. So and I've spoke to the leaders of Black Lives Matter before, and I get what they're saying. I don't agree with every single thing that their approaches maybe or their strategies. But I understand where they're coming from as a Black person. We have to be as wise as a serpent, but yet sometimes, not all the time, but gentle as a dove. And so the goal should always be to win the war and not the battle. I think the Black Lives Movement has gotten a lot of momentum, particularly with the visibility of some of the killings, the murders of Black people, unarmed Black people at that. And then there's splinter groups that have made and caused the Black Lives Movement bad, because people will do things under the guise of any organization, but they're not really the real directors of it, and so they will be able to kidnap the real messaging of what we're trying to accomplish as Black people. I like to say Black Lives Matter too, myself personally. Do I believe all lives matter? Of course, and so does the Black Lives Matter movement. But you'll have people that will come and they will act out in ways that are not in alignment with the Black Lives Movement in general, and not even in alignment with the Black Lives Movement organization. And so, whether you're listening to CNN or Fox News or MSNBC, whatever you're listening to, we have to be careful that we don't allow the media and social media to spin things up and spin things down, and cause further division in our nation, because there is a lot of divisiveness that's going on. And it's really because people have not gotten to know one another. We're getting to know one another on this phone call. And I'm sure our paths will continue to cross. And so too many times people judge the book by the cover with Black Lives Matter movement, and then it becomes a negative impact with some. And others, they understand it, or they just want to be a part of something that to them is appearing to address racism. We have systemic racism, structural racism, institutional racism in this country. It has to be uprooted. There has to be more diversity in the boardrooms. There has to be more diversity in the classrooms. There has to be more diversity in government. There has to be more of an equitable approach for all people. And Black peoples have suffered, along with indigenous Indians, the most. But we have plenty of minorities that have suffered, the Japanese, the Latinos, and Mexicans. But Blacks were brought over here not by choice and have provided free labor to create this country and yet be deprived of just the fair rights and access to resources just to live our lives. So we have to right these wrongs. And I think we can do it in a myriad of ways. So that being said, have I addressed your questions, Les? And I'm definitely open for more, but the ones that you've listed early on.
Well, you've more than addressed them, Reverend Paul, and I think you've given us a lot to think about. I imagine there are some questions within the group. Does anybody have a question for Pastor Paul? Bonnie?
Thank you so much for your talk, Pastor Paul. It was, I'm not surprised, and yet it still gets to me, So the question that I have to you is, historically things were just very openly brutal and openly racist, and now it's, it's not politically correct to be racist, but there's still racism that happens. And what I see happening that really concerns me is something that I guess can be termed performative allyship. And so I'm trying to process, distinguishing between what is, performative allyship versus true allyship. And so a couple examples, one which is very sinister, which would be like people being paid to go and loot at peaceful protests to delegitimize the movement, right? I mean, that is just subversive and dishonest and manipulating the media. But then there's also well-intentioned, but still just as harmful things that happen, like the conflict that came up with the Wall of Moms, where it was supposed to be in support of BLM, and then they actually just use that as to bolster their own popularity and lead it in a completely different direction. And there was this huge breakup. And I see these things in the corporate world as well, where there's these, we are diverse and we have diversity programs. And then anyone who's not completely thrilled with, having to manage a diversity, campaign or something, but then they're never promoted and never paid equally, they're quietly silenced, and it's all basically a show. Not at every company, but I see this where it's checkbox diversity. Okay, we had our MLK event for the year, and we're still completely treating people inequitably. And that to me is so frustrating, because I feel like it effectively manipulates the public. I mean, you'll go shop at a store or something thinking they promote diversity, they're an equal opportunity employer, when the truth, as I've encountered it, is people can break as many laws as they want, as long as they have enough money. And that was a hard truth for me to swallow. And so I don't want to just be like the bearer of bad news either, but I guess I see this as an ongoing struggle that we're going to have for this next wave of dealing with racism, is dealing with false allies and dealing with well-intentioned allies that think that they know better. And so like for me, if I want to support or be an ally to a group, like let's say I want to support Black lives, there has to be Black leadership there. If I want to support a women's movement, the women have to be in leadership there, because otherwise it gets too confusing and it gets too hard to understand what's really happening. So I don't have a very clear question, except that I'm struggling with this and I don't really know how we're gonna sort out the truth.
Bonnie, the fact that you are cognizant you are aware of these issues, in itself tells me where your heart and where your spirit is on this. Um, Not everyone could as clearly articulate the issues, the impediments for progress to be made with Blacks. Um, the obstacles that you have just
Good.
uh, communicated
You want to hear a little
uh,
bit?
were spot on. And so, um, with me, what I always share with people is you're beyond what I'm about to say clearly, because you would otherwise you wouldn't be able to say from the insight you just given. Is, you know, when you hear of conversations that you know are racist, and racism could be blacks to whites, Mexicans to Chinese, whatever. Racism is racism. But in this case, we're talking about black people. When you hear of that, you know, um, pause for a moment, and then, um, if you feel led, respond to the racist system, the racist comments that may be before you, but don't react to it. And I say that reacting is giving the control to others. In responding, you maintain that control. It's your response, not an example. If someone hits me, I can react and hit them back, right? Or I can respond and ask a question. Why did you do that? And so, I always, want people to lean in, but they need to be led. They need to be mindful on how they do that. Um, there are groups out there that are trying to give Black Lives Movement a bad name, the organization a bad name, but also the movement. And then there are these organizations that, like you said, are checking off the box. And we need to have people from all ethnicities, races, to hold those people accountable. The reason why this is at the level it is because it's not just black people fighting this fight now. More people are stepping up and leaning in and saying enough is enough. We can no longer turn a blind eye or turn our heads over the injustices that are occurring to anyone, but specifically black people. And so we must synergistically look at and strategically look at how do we address these systemic issues in whatever sector that you have influence in. You know, if you are in education, how do we look at we have to put a lens on, we have to put the optics on there of how we are going to strategize and start to address it. But and the thing of it is, and this is no knock on young folks, because young folks really are making this happen. It's not us older folks or seasoned folks, as I like to say. The young folks says we're not. Oh no, we're not tolerating this. And so, if they wouldn't be doing this, then we would still be what we've done. What 10 years ago, we'd still everything goes up when I and it's like when I speak to the crowds, I tell them that it's very unfortunate to see the shooting of unarmed black people, um, but this is not going to end. It's going to happen again. I believe that, and I actually know that it's going to happen again. Now, it is going to happen less, though, because there's an optics on this. You know, police reform, government officials now are digging in because they see that these young folks who have plenty of energy, and young folks, they don't want stuff done today. They want stuff done yesterday. Okay. They're the microwave age. Us older folks, we tend to, you know, pause and sit, let it sit, and things of that nature. And I think you have to use both those approaches. You have to go down parallel tracks. You have to have very actionable things that keep the young people engaged and channeled in the right direction. And then you have to have the tactical, and you have to have the strategic. So you have to go down both those, be able to address both those audiences. And there's exception to all age groups when it comes to that. So I would say to you, Bonnie, you know, look at where do you feel most led in championing the cause to address racism? You know, is it in the workplace? Is it in government? Is it in law enforcement? And look to see who is there. And yes, if it's a women's organization, to me, a woman should be lenient. If it's a Black organization, if it's a Latino organization, you should have representation of the very population that they're targeting to serve at the leadership position. I can't tell a woman what it feels like to have a baby. I'm a man. So, I mean, but we've allowed some systems to prevent the glass, you know, from the glass ceiling has prevented women and minorities from being able to excel in this world because of the people that are in power. And it's going to make people uncomfortable, but we have to look at, okay, I don't have to necessarily, you don't have to give up something for me to get something, but you can help me raise up. High tide makes many boats float. And so some people are very nervous out there, to be candid, that, oh, I'm going to have to give up this. Well, even if we know that people have ill-gotten gains, okay? People say, well, I didn't enforce slavery. I get that, but you still benefited from it. If your grandfather was a slave owner, or if your grandfather was indifferent to the slave owners and yet still was a part of the process, because either you're part of the solution or you're part of the problem. There's no in between on this. Now you have another opportunity to be more a part of the solution by helping have more equitable environment for Black people. Help us to build a foundation so that we can send our kids to schools as well. You know, trade schools, JCs, universities. You know, there's a myriad of ways that I think we as Americans can really support a upward mobility for Black people. And education obviously is one of those leading factors, and, you know, creating a scholarship fund. You know, that's what we are doing at our church, what we've done at our church, to help those that can't afford to even pay for books and things of that nature. That to me is going to be very foundational for those we can, even though we're a small church, we make sure that we support our youth so that they can have a better life than some of us that had previously. You know, help tutor. And the most important thing that I think non-Black people can do is listen to the stories, because then you get a perspective and insight into someone's out, even if it's only a little bit, but you, and to me, it would create a more empathetic heart by seeing the atrocities and the negative experiences that Blacks have gone through and the trauma that we grew up with and live with every day. It gets to be a bit much, even as a faith leader. there's so many Black people that come to me and say that they feel like giving up because no matter what they try, they seem to run into roadblocks. And it's sad. It's sad that we got to live this way in one of the most influential, affluent countries in the world, in the Silicon Valley, one of the most richest areas in the country. And yet you have people in pockets of poverty that are living beneath. We feed 1,500 people every week here, 1,500 families. And the line just keeps growing and growing because, COVID-19 and people being laid off because they have the lower wage earning jobs. And if they're in the hospitality or service industry, there's not a whole lot of hours or they've been laid off. And we're about to have a tsunami of evictions that started this month. And the last date for the moratorium over the evictions, it'll be January. And we're going to have another tsunami at the end of October and January. So we're going to have a greater amount of homeless people, homeless families. And a lot of them are Black and a lot of them are people of color. So, that's why, we have to lobby our legislators. We have to lobby corporations, big tech, geotech, any tech out there. We have to lobby, the foundations get the money from donors and corporations. We have to make our voices known and heard to address the injustices. COVID-19 has really, it's been a negative impact, but it also has been a very clarifying viewpoint of the disparities. If I look at homelessness, which is, one of the fields that I'm in, if I look at Santa Clara County, Blacks make up 2% of the county's population, but Blacks also make up 17% of the homeless population. That's a systems problem. That's a system. And so we have to change the systems. We have to address the systems. The system with the police brutality stuff, it's doing what it was designed to do. As a person with a badge, I have 2 badges, one for Palo Alto and one for East Palo Alto. And then I have one of my chaplains for Mountain View. And the system was designed to keep people, particularly slaves, in place. This is just a new form of slavery. It does not mean that the cops that are out there are all bad, because there are more. No one hates a bad cop than a good cop. Trust me on that, because it makes that good cop's job that much more challenging when they use those bad tactics. But we got to uproot and get those bad cops out, just like we got to get those bad pastors out, bad teachers out, bad parents out of kids' life that abuse their kids. All of that has to be addressed. So anyway, I'm sorry, talking too much here. Other questions?
Thank you so much.
Essie?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Reverend Bains, thank you very much for your talk. I was very moved, and it's difficult to hear a great deal of your experience your firsthand experience and feeling with the difficulty of even hearing it. I can't imagine what it is to live it. Thank you for sharing it. My question to you is, I heard you say that with racism, a person is either racist or anti-racist, and there's no in between. This problem is very entrenched in our country. And I wonder, where's the demilitarized zone? If there's no in between. And just to elaborate on that a little bit, my own experience over years of living in a Buddhist community where we had meetings to address particularly these issues within the community I was living in. My experience is I find pockets of racism in myself that I didn't know about. And so I'm wondering how you would define the demilitarized zone where this very entrenched problem that goes so deeply into society, and there are those that are so blatantly racist. There's no, the N word, whatever, there's no hiding it. But then there are also, and it appears to me, a whole spectrum that we have to work on. So I just wanted to ask you about that and how you see it.
That's a very good question, Kathy. I don't even think I've even ran across that question in all the talks that I've had. And so what comes to mind is I think people do have to define, and definition obviously, or interpretation of certain words can mean something different to one than it is the other. I think that there are certain racist perspectives and then also biases. And I don't always know if they are the same. When you said you find pockets of racism in you, I think that every last one of us from all ethnicities, races, are biased. I have some biases in me, and I have to constantly, pray and meditate to help God reveal that to me, so that when I'm talking with people, even if I know that they are coming from a different perspective, that I'm not entering in with this bias of who they are, and in a way, in such a way that it really defocuses me on who I am. And so when we recognize these biases or racist pockets, what are we willing to do about it? We must ask ourselves that question. I forgot her name. Dr. Everhart over at Stanford wrote a book on biases, and just outstanding. She's African American, and her book is off the shelf. It's hard. There's a waiting list for it, and we were together last month just talking about police brutality and things of that. It was a bunch of Black leaders, and we also had police departments, police unions from major police departments from around California in this meeting. And we all have these biases, and we have to really start to look at examining them and then untraining our way of thinking about others. Now, we got the Ku Klux Klan. You got these extreme white supremacist groups. I mean, we know who they are and what they're about. But the common person, that's something that to me is a whole lot more challenging, because some people don't know that they're biased or that they're racist, that these microaggressions, that we like to call them, are permeated throughout society to where it has become a normality in the way we act out in life, and we don't even realize it. So where is the demilitarization zone? I don't know if there is one. And I'm speaking from my perspective, I just feel that we have to constantly do self-examination. And as people of faith, we have to pray and ask for that to be revealed to us on a daily basis. And if we're not willing to call it out and do something about it, then we really have a deeper problem. We have a much deeper problem, is how I see it. I don't know if that answers your question. It's just my initial thoughts on, where is the demilitarization zone? I just don't see one. I don't know if I even believe that there should be one. I believe that people should do something about any injustice that's against anybody, male or female, any ethnicity. I think we should do something about it. It may not have to be, as we like to say, all things could be lawful, but not expedient. It may not have to be at that moment, but there should be some type of plan to address the issue. Is that helpful at all?
I think it elaborates your thinking on it, and I guess I'm still, for me, it's a question, and I wonder if one possible way of thinking of a demilitarized zone is with a person who we see as racist, if we might make an effort to not see them as only racist. Because I don't agree with you that we know them. We know what they are. I don't think we so. I shouldn't put it so forcefully. But I feel for myself that when a person is exhibiting extreme racist behavior, I don't know them. I don't really know them. I don't understand them. I don't get them. I don't get it. The microaggressions, I get it. I get it because I get it from here. But the big ones, I don't know them. I don't. It's not that I don't want to. I don't. I feel like if I knew them, I could meet them. I could communicate with them. Maybe, and I don't know if that's realistic or not, but I feel that way.
And to me, what we feel is the true, honest position of where we are, period. And no one can tell you how you feel. That's
for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And let me amend something here, because I could have miscommunicated. I'm not saying that when you see there's extreme racist people out there, those are the ones that we know where they are. And I want to circle back to seek to understand, to be understood. And so when I would talk to the Ku Klux Klan or the white supremacists any day, and I would ask them questions of why do they feel the way they feel, so I can start to really understand, what has triggered something in their life to make them do and act the way they're acting. And then, share maybe something from my perspective that makes me do and act the way I act. And with the goal in mind of trying to win them from being a continue to be a racist. That would be my goal. And the only way, it's kind of like what we say, if God says you want to have, you need more love in your life, well, he's not going to put lovable people in your life. He's going to put unquote unquote what people would consider unlovable people. He's going to put that person in life because he says you need to grow in this area of Bains. Okay, so the DNA that he's given me, sometimes I almost feel like it's a curse because there's a lot of problems that seem to come my way, but he said he won't put no more on me than I can bear. And sometimes I feel like it's unbearable. But then I learned something in that experience. I learned something in that journey that I'm having with that person or persons. And you come out stronger on the other side because you understand the issue, the complexity of it, the perspectives of it in a much greater realm. And so it's an opportunity to address hate with love. That's how I look at it. But it does need to be called out at the front end, because it's kind of like a drug addict or alcoholic. The first thing they must do is admit that they have a problem. And so a different perspective is not going to admit they have a problem, and you can't help them with that until you understand where they're coming from. And so that's why we must have, conversations about the hard topic, about the elephant in the room. We cannot continue to kick the can down the road to the point of nothing gets done. And now I'm not saying that we are here. Well, we are here to make the world a better place. And we must use the tools that have been given us to do that. And so that will mean different things for different people at different times. So that's, I think that's my amendment to my comments.
I appreciate it. And I think you did answer my question. I feel like if I would offer this, that perhaps the demilitarized zone is living the unbearable and continuing to work on the problem. Maybe that's it. And I really appreciate your effort to bear the unbearable and continue to work on the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
You're welcome.
Dave?
Thank you for your talk, Reverend Paul. This has made all of us, I'm sure, think even more deeply about this. And as you can see, a lot of us have been thinking about this and pondering it for a long time. This kind of nuanced conversation seems to me to be probably the key to unraveling this long-term problem that we have in our society. And I mean, you sort of epitomized, I think, some of the subtleties of this a few minutes ago when you talked about the way that all cops are not bad, and yet the good cops want to get rid of the bad cops. I think a large part of the problem that we're having in our society right now is a lot of the conversation is either treating this problem as one of simply individuals, good individuals and bad individuals. There's no such thing as systemic racism. It's only society is just a collection of individuals, and therefore, if we could just get rid of the bad apples, everything would be fine. Or from another point of view, I never owned slaves, so it's not my fault. And then at the other extreme, there's the idea that this isn't really about individuals at all. It's just about systemic problems. And so, for example, that young man who thought, well, I see you wearing this police uniform, and so you must be a cop, and therefore, I don't like you, and I'm afraid of you. It seems to me that, as you just said a few minutes ago, what we really have is this Gordian knot of individual and societal problems all tied around each other. And there seem to be loud voices in the public discussion about this who are actively promoting a very one-dimensional approach to this whole thing. And I wonder if you have any insights into how we can elevate the social discussion about this to address some of these complexities, given the understandable fact that people don't want to deal with complex things, especially when they're uncomfortable.
Wow. we don't have that much time, Dave, but
sorry.
Yeah. As you are in these conversations in different circles, you get a wide variety of perspectives, and some cause you to think, and some are very eye-opening. And people on one side, the people want a solution, and like I said earlier, they want it yesterday. And I think in some areas there's an unrealistic perspective that this is going to get solved overnight. And the first thing that I tell everybody, everywhere I go, is we did not get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of here overnight. It's just not going to happen. That being said, though, there's an old saying, how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time, right? And so we have to look at, again, there's health disparities, there's educational disparities, there's income disparities, there's housing disparities. These are major focal points for us to address. And it's going to take a multiplicity of very diverse perspectives and backgrounds to really address these things. And so people have to understand that we need to be in this for the long haul, because we're talking about centuries and generations of institutional racism. And so there's no quick fix in this. There's some action steps that we're taking, that we will take this year, that we probably won't see the results until 20 years from now. But it has to start now to help de-ravel those systems in whatever area of focal point that we are addressing. It has to start now, while the empathy is here, the willingness is here, and I even believe that there is a willingness in government. I know there is actually, there are conversations that's being had about how to have a more equitable society in our states. So it's a challenging, most challenging issue. Um, but if not us, then who? If not now, then when? So we have to synergistically come together and work together to unravel what has taken decades and centuries to be in place. I can't really, with the time gauge that we have, we can have another conversation and maybe share, like I was on a call, this is Saturday. It's Blur's Day to me, so it's Blur's Day. That's what I tell people. With corporate leaders just 2 days ago, and we're talking about racism in the workplace, and these are tech companies. And some of the things that they're doing to unravel the racism, like how, and this is just some examples, and I don't know if this is really addressing your question, Dave, but I'm saying it anyway. How we look at our hiring practices, and how we have certain questions, the way it's phrased, it's the nomenclature that we use, to describe things. Even when we use the words black and white, how black is more of the negative and white is more of the positive. It's those microaggressions that add up to this big issue of things. And so that's why I say when we're made, we have to create awareness and then education and then hopefully action. Awareness, education, and then action. It does not mean we have to hit a home run, but we need to get on first base in the process of things. And so when we look at hiring, if there's someone in here that's in that area, they can look at and go back and look at those policies and look at, are they biased in any way? When you are in a position of, whatever position you're in, what area of influence do you have to turn the lights on, put some optics on something that you see is not right? Little actionable steps is what I feel we can do. That's the eating of the elephant, one bite at a time. Does that make sense at all? Because sometimes
Absolutely.
But that's an excellent question.
Okay. I think, Lee, do you have a question?
Yes, I have one question. I want to say thanks to you, Reverend Paul, for giving us such a wonderful, heartfelt talk. It really has been amazing. And I wanted to ask the question, what can we do in our community? How can members of this community help in the efforts that your community is working on?
What can you do? Well, one, you all have started by having this conversation. And it's not like I want to have these conversations all the time. It's not like that. But I know that it's a necessary step in order to make our humanity whole. And so that's me playing my role, my part in that overall big, ginormous process. You can help by listening. You can help by learning about what we've gone through as Black people. There are some good things on Netflix, 13th Amendment, looking at some of the documentaries and even some of the movies that, Thurgood Marshall, what he went through, and just Black people that they went to get to where they are. The book by Richard Rothstein, The Color of Law, I just think is an excellent book.
Yeah.
Also, Dr. Rowe, she has a book called Healing Racial Trauma, and she brings in many different races, but it's focused on Blacks. Now, she referenced Christian. She is from a Christian faith background, so just know that going in. But it's a very good book. I read it 3 times, and it just talks to various types of trauma that I didn't even know I had. Generational trauma and vicarious trauma. Those are things that we don't even realize. So reading those books and just educating yourself on also. I haven't read White Privilege. I'm also cautious on some things. I do want to read it because I've heard both many people tell me White Black. That's a very, very good book. White Frailty. I don't know the authors of them, but you can Google them. Amazon. So read those books. I think that would be very helpful and insightful. But talk to Black people, invite them over. I mean, it's COVID now, but but invite them to a Zoom call or a distance cup of coffee. Here are things that I think help. I always say I've always done this. I don't care what race they are. When I'm walking down the street, I actually say hi to people.
Me too. I really, what I wanted to say was, if people who are part of our community want to volunteer, actually physically get in there, help serve people lunch or, whatever it is, where do you need volunteers to actually on the spot come in and help out?
Oh, okay. I'm always, one of our guiding principles is other centered. So sometimes I'm always focusing on everybody else as opposed to our own organization. Yes, we have opportunities where people can come and serve dinner. We practice physical distancing. I don't say social distancing, I say physical. I want still people to be social. And so you could come, we just have to sign up. You can bring meals for about 60 people. Enough food for 60 people here. You can volunteer to deliver meals because we have people staying in hotels right now. And we have a little process for that where you just leave the meal outside their door. They know when you're coming. It's all packaged up. So you become the door dasher. When we have our construction projects, we'll need people to come and help paint, help clean. Well, you can help come and clean all the time if you're into that.
We do some of that here too.
Yeah, my wife said we can use it at my house as well. Of course, help us raise awareness of the issue of homelessness, unhoused people, what you're doing now, the injustices that's occurring. Fundraising. Are we doing a fundraiser? We're trying to figure out how to do a fundraiser this year. Follow us, I guess. My team and my development person would probably say, follow us on social media. believe it or not, I don't like social media, but you know, it's a part of our everyday life. I'm kind of old-fashioned guy. Um, Help us think through um, um, things. Maybe if someone has an expertise in programmatic, um, 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 the area of developing programs, analyzing programs, be a sounding board to us when we were talking about teeing certain things up that we might want to publicize. You know, um, we are looking, help us hire people. We hire formerly incarcerated, we hire homeless people, and we hire very educated and experienced people. But there are sometimes where areas like now we're looking for administrative assistant for our new venture, someone to give us 15 hours a week right now while we're small, and to help us handle those responsibilities. We're going to be hiring a bookkeeper slash accounting person. And so we'll have job descriptions for those. Um, Help us become better organized. Um, I know that's kind of broad, but you know, we can have conversations with my staff members, with those who might be interested in helping us in those ways. Get us connected to corporations. I know that's one thing. If you do give to us, and if they have a matching program, that is very helpful. Um, so yeah, those are some of the things that I could think of. I don't know why I always have a problem with that part when people ask me for help. I need to.
Well, no, you've given a lot of options, so thank you. I'm sure there are ways that some of us can join with you and help.
Oh,
So if we want to follow up on Lee's question, is there a contact person in your organization that we should start working with?
yes, that would be Alicia Garcia. She's over all of our programs and services. And then Dina Bartello, she's our development director.
Zena?
Or Dana.
Dina, D-I-N-A. I'm going to try to put it in the chat box.
Okay, great. I think I've got the names, so.
Oh, yeah, Bonnie, thank you for putting White Frailty up there. I just saw that. I don't always put in the chat box.
And White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo.
Yeah, yep, that's it.
And
I wanted to say something about Kathy's question about the demilitarized zone. It occurs to me that for some people, the demilitarized zone is indifference. It's a very safe place to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Not creative at all, but it's it keeps you away from being either racist or anti-racist. You just go take comfort by being in there. But that's just an observation. You talked about examining our biases as a way to start confronting our own internal racism. And I just wanted to point out that's exactly what our practice does. Mm-hmm. Our practice is intended for us to see those things that have been covered up and hidden from us that prevent us from leading a fully honest and authentic life. The last question I had for you, I don't imagine you're holding in church services right now, but my question is there some way that our congregation can get to know your congregation just as a way of demonstrating support? You know, this is in addition to maybe doing some volunteer work. Is that feasible?
I laugh because last night, I think I alluded to this earlier, where we had non-Black pastors, mostly white pastors, come from all over the Bay Area and have a spirit of repentance, they were repenting for having a spirit of indifference. And one of the commitments that we weren't asking, but the white pastors were asking other white pastors to do was to exchange their pulpit a minimum of twice a year, and for the congregations to have a joint service twice a year. And so you just brought, something very similar up is what I heard you saying, not a joint service, but you participate in our service. And it wasn't a joint service with the other group actually either way, but it's exchanging pulpits where I would speak at a white church, predominantly white church, and they would speak at my church. Yeah, we have a very small group, but we're a very welcoming group. And what we can do is send you the link. We have a Zoom service. You're correct. We're not, even though I know it has been lifted to a degree to have in-house worship services I think it's in San Mateo County, because our church is in San Mateo County. You guys are in San Mateo County. But it doesn't make a difference. You can Zoom in with us and get a flavor of how we worship.
Okay, good.
And that would be Nakia Davis. I'll put her name and contact in here. She's my assistant that coordinates that. That's a great thought, Les. I like that. Didn't think of that either. So I'll put her contact information in here. Any other comments you have before I guess you do some closing comment?
No, I just want to say thank you. So, okay.
I want to say, well, let me do this because I have middle-aged moments every now and then. So let me just get it done. 6:32. There you go. That's my assistant.
I'll send it to you, Les.
Oh, yeah, I've got it.
Okay, great.
I want to first, I'll say again, what I started off saying is thank you for your willingness to have a courageous conversation or a conversation. And to continue down that road of listening and learning, and then hopefully leaning into whatever you feel led to do. KC, in regard to your comments around reparations, I know that is a very sensitive subject, even though we have seen historically what the Germans have done with the Jews over in Germany and what America has done with the Japanese, and to very little degree the indigenous Indians that were here. That there is, some. It's definitely discussions. But it's very sensitive. But I actually believe it's very needed. I mean, many of you know, if you know your history about, how blacks after the slavery was promised 40 acres and a mule. Well, we're still waiting on those 40 acres and a mule. Okay. I believe that the time is right for reparations, but I think it has to be very strategically done. And that's why I say, developing scholarship funds, maybe free tuition for Blacks at major universities, for them to catch up in the educational field, helping Blacks particularly have home ownership so then they can pass on, create wealth generational wealth. Extremely low interest loans. There's a variety of ways that I think that could be implemented, and that there should be something though, because the mass incarceration has just did so much damage to Black people, and so we need to be able to help have a more equitable living for Black people. So I just want to say this. Remember this in closing, that I truly believe that none of us is as strong as all of us, and that we are better together than we are apart. There's a passage out of the Bible that says how good and how pleasant it is for brothers and sisters to dwell together in unity. And my question is this to you all: what is the first three letters of the word unity? Someone respond.
You and I.
You and I.
You and I are the ones that's going to make a difference. If it's going to be, it's up to me. And just tell that to yourself. Be an encouragement to yourself as well as to others. I just truly believe there's power in the people when we come together. So thank you for having me. One of you might have to write a letter to my wife and tell her yes, and thank her for sharing my time. Today is our work day, and I said I have to go to the office on this call because we committed to it, and it's for the greater. She understands. I'm slightly kidding. But thank you for having me, and thank you for your willingness to want to do something about the issue of racism. I commend you all. Les, Bonnie, thank you all for your leadership. Thank you. If you have other questions or anything, I'll do the best I can. My schedule is crazy, but this is important. And, I want to try to figure out a way where, all these different groups, pockets, communities can come together. And, someone can organize that, that would be a wonderful thing, I think. But it's coming slowly but surely. Thank you all.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you.